an answer on the given topic. Okay, so approximately 15 minutes per student. Is it okay?
It is. Thank you very much.
And questions and answers. I'm going to be very upfront with you, because if it is only you who is speaking, then obviously you can read out whatever you want. However, if it is more like a flow, the conversation of questions and answers, then we can assess in a more thorough fashion what you really know about global economics as such. Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, it is my pleasure. Actually, I'm quite disappointed that I was unable to see all of you in person throughout the semester. So
Yeah,
this is the joy of education, having students, and being deprived of students. It's really discouraging, really. So this is why we come to a university, to have students, to meet people. So it is really, really discouraging not to know everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, while we are waiting for the other students to join, I am asking you, I have sent 4 links in the chat box, and actually please check it out, because I have already asked Katalin to kindly upload it to the Moodle system. So actually I asked her 15 minutes ago to kindly upload this kind of materials, so these 4 links to the Moodle system. Actually 3 of them are from the World Trade Organization, and 1 is from Ernst & Young. I quite like Ernst & Young, just like actually McKinsey. They've got really good reports. Have you received them? Have you received them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm asking you to open them, and then we are going to wait 1 more minute, and then we are going to go ahead, okay? Okay, so if everyone has joined, then yeah, I wish you a very good afternoon. I hope that you had nice 4 days off. And actually, we would like to go on with our material. And last week, I told you that actually we have completed the global supply chains, and we have completed the issue of foreign direct investments. And I promised you that this week we are going to open up a next big chapter, which is international trade. Actually, the 2 topics are not independent from each other. So I need to underline that the 2 big topics are not independent from each other. So while foreign direct investments obviously speak about the integration of the capital markets in the world, so actually we said that global economics is nothing else but the integration of the share markets. Actually, we have covered a reasonable chunk, because foreign direct investments basically refer to the integration of the capital markets. So therefore, they are hugely relevant. Obviously, as I told you, they are facilitated by other players of the global economy. So we said that there are 3 main actors in the global economy: nation states, global value chains, transnational corporations or multinational enterprises, as you like, and international organizations. And obviously, the integration of the share markets is carried out more often than not by global value chains. However, the regulatory circumstances are defined by nation states. And actually, this is why I was drawing your kind attention to IPAs, the investment promotion agencies operating all around the world under different ministries, because actually these are the sub-organizations of ministries that facilitate international movement, the international flow of capital, foreign direct investments. So now we are opening up a new chapter. Now we are opening up a new section, which is international trade. However, we need to recognize that international trade and international investment are not independent from each other. And actually, this is why I am asking you to first and foremost open up, I'll tell you which one. I'm opening up my own chat box, and hang on, it is the same statistics. Yeah, I cannot find my own. Sorry. Sorry, I almost lost everyone. Okay. Yeah, this is not the one. Sorry, I'm looking for. Please give me a moment. Please give me a moment. I don't know where I have copied my links. Okay, doesn't matter. I shall find it in a minute. I shall find it in a minute. It was an OECD, and I cannot find it because it's all WTO. Sorry, I lost my link, but I'll find it in a minute. Okay. Got it. Very good. This is what I mean. Okay. Can you open? This is not from the WTO, however, it is from the OECD. Have you got it? Have you got it? Have you received it? Okay, sorry, I missed it. I don't know why. I forgot to copy, and this is why I haven't shared it in the link. So, what I would like to tell you right now, and I would like you to read this page and know it for the exam because it is highly, highly important. So before the millennium, so in the late 1980s and in the late 1990s, when we were speaking about international trade, then the concept was that countries are producing goods and services, and countries are offering their goods and services and their final products to consumers abroad. So actually, international trade was the creation of a country, of an individual country that used to produce goods and offer services that were exported to other countries as final products, and they were offered to consumers of other countries. Actually, this used to be the theory, but now this is past and this is behind us. Because this is why I'm asking you to kindly read this page. The point is that only 30% of all trade in goods and services is this type of the trade, so that a country's small and medium enterprise, a startup, a governmental organization, a government-initiated enterprise produces a good or a service and it exports abroad. 70% of the international trade today is within global value chains. So it means that services, raw materials, parts, components are traveling cross borders because they are internalized by global value chains, transnational corporations. Okay, so this is hugely, hugely important. There is an example in the 4th paragraph where it is explained that, for instance, if a smartphone is assembled in China, it might include a graphic design element from the United States, a computer code from France, silicone chips from Singapore, precious metals from Bolivia, and so on and so forth. So in the 21st century, it is very difficult to tell the country of origin. And therefore, we've got a measurement which is called TIVA. So it is called TIVA. It is explained in the second big chapter. It is written, better measurement leads to better policies. And it is called the so-called trade in value added. So TIVA stands for trade in value added. And it means that within value chains, it is measured how much of the value added of a given end product is produced in a single country. Okay, so once more, if international trade, or if 70% of the international trade happens within global value chains, then it is very important to identify how much, what percentage of a given product was produced in one single country. And the measurement, so the precise or the concrete measurement, is called trade in value added, which means it is measured how much value is added to a good or a service in one single country within the system of the value chain. Do you understand me? Do you understand me?
Yes.
Okay, so it is very important. Okay, so this is very important to know that basically, I wouldn't say that international trade in the 21st century is non-existent. However, international trade per se, accidental international trade, when a small or medium enterprise exports products globally, is very rare. It only represents 30% of the international trade. 70% of the international trade happens within global value chains. Actually, this is why, before we go to our next document, to our Ernst & Young document, it is very important to underline that if a country designs, facilitates an international trade policy, then it is very important to understand that small and medium enterprises are going to be represented in the global market only if they are connected to a value chain, so a global value chain. So one of the aims, one of the principles, one of the policies of each and every national government is to link small and medium enterprises to global value chains as suppliers, as domestic suppliers, because this is the only way to give a leeway, to give a gate for small and medium enterprises on the global market. So actually, when I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I cannot really remember, when I was speaking about the local content requirement, do you remember? Do you remember when I spoke about the local content requirement? Actually, it has got the same aim. If a regional integration or a country requires to have a certain amount of, a certain percentage of a local content requirement, actually it goes hand in hand with this aim. It is the connection of small and medium enterprises as suppliers to global value chains. Okay, so this is the point. So having a local content requirement is basically the binding of small and medium enterprises to global value chains. And now I would like you to kindly open the Ernst & Young publication, please. The title is How COVID-19 Impacted Supply Chains and What Comes Next. Okay? Have you got it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let us scroll down and I'm going to summarize. I'm going to be very honest with you. As you know, I am quite often referring to international organizations as a sources of knowledge, as a sources of documentation for education. When we started the global economics class, I told you that we are going to spend quite a lot of time on, so quite much time on nation states, and we are also going to spend time on global value chains. However, we don't really have time for international organizations because that is basically a different class. However, we are very much reliant on the publications of international organizations because if you would like to gain global knowledge, then you need to have global sources. And I'm going to stop here for a moment before we go on with this text. So international organizations can be initiated by governments, for instance, the UN system and its subsystems, the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank, and so on and so forth, the UNCTAD, and so on and so forth. Or equally, the OECD is also a government-initiated international organization from which we had our previous publication. However, there are also private organizations, for instance, McKinsey and Ernst & Young. And I'm strongly encouraging you to read the publications of Ernst & Young and McKinsey because they are quicker, they are faster, they have fresher and later publications on the crisis and the trends of the global economy than the big government-initiated international organizations themselves. So the reason why I was picking out this article is because it was published at the end of February 2021. It is very fresh, and actually this is a questionnaire that was run around 200 senior level supply chain executives in the world, and they are basically delivering the results of 200 companies to us. So how the pandemic has impacted these companies. And as you scroll around, so please go around, you are going to see a chart. And you are going to see that basically 72% of the respondents said that the pandemic had an absolutely negative effect on the company. 17% said that it had a significantly negative effect on the company, and 55 said that it was generally negative, not significantly, but generally negative. Altogether, almost 3/4 of the companies say that the pandemic had a huge negative impact on them. 18% of the company leaders, the CEOs, the chief executive officers said that the pandemic had no effect whatsoever on their company. And interestingly, and I would like to underline, and we are going to cover that later in the World Trade Organization documents, altogether 11% of the companies said that the pandemic had a positive, a mostly positive, or a significantly positive effect on the company. Actually, I would like to touch upon this end, so the 8% positive and the 3% significantly positive effects, because we would ask how and why. And actually the answer is, and it is quite interesting, for instance, pharmaceuticals have experienced a huge rise, but not only those companies that are delivering the vaccines. So it is not only Sinopharm and AstraZeneca and Moderna and so on and so forth, but for instance, there are some companies that are providing, for instance, blood dilutants that are combined with the vaccination. So some kind of vitamins and so on and so forth. So pharmaceutical companies experienced a huge rise. Also, interestingly, some ICT companies, so information and telecommunications companies, have also experienced a huge rise because of the usage of cell phones and iPads and computers and so on and so forth. And actually, the rise of the ICT industry itself was also endorsed by, also initiated by governments, because of the huge home officing and huge homeschooling. In some countries, governments, central and local governments, are providing ICT facilities to the citizens and to the employees of the companies. So this is why it is not only pharmaceuticals, but also ICT companies that are on the rise and rise. But it is not only those two. There is also a third main grouping. So you can also experience a third main group. And the third main group is food companies. So food providers, especially first and foremost, those that are providing tin food, so conserved food, tin food, because actually especially at the beginning of the crisis, and especially at the very beginning of the several waves of the crisis, people were absolutely shocked that food supply might stop, might be on a hold, and this is why they were looking for huge stocks in food. So actually, these three, pharmaceutical companies, ICT companies, and food companies, are the ones that have experienced a positive effect. Actually, I'm not sure if it was this document or some of the other documents, but I was smiling because some of the companies that are providing hygienic tissues are also for the restrooms, for the bathrooms, hygienic tissues, have experienced a huge rise because of the fear of the customers, that they were afraid that they would run out on hygienic products. So they also have experienced the rise, not as much as the food companies, ICT and pharmaceutical companies, but massive rise compared to their own standards. So actually, this is what I would like to say, that basically almost 3/4 of the companies were negatively hit by the crisis. There is less than 20% who were unaffected, basically, and that there are winners of the crisis. Why is it important to understand? Because the entire story, as we spoke about it last week, is about breaking up the value chains. So actually, the question is, which value chains are going to break up and which value chains are going to be intact? And it depends on the industry. So it very much depends on the industry. And those industries that were positively affected are unlikely to break up. So as we spoke last week, it depends on the industry. So if it is a service sector, if it is ICT based, then it is highly unlikely to break down. However, if it is production based, then there is a huge possibility that the global value chain is going to break down. Okay, let's go down. So let's go down and let's have a look at the changes on the horizon for supply chains. Company leaders, so there you can see a chart which is titled "Increased Visibility is the top priority over the next 36 months and the top 3 priority in the next year." So actually, company leaders, CEOs, chief executive officers were asked the question what they prioritize, so what they really prioritize in the coming 1 year or the coming 1.5, 2 years. And actually, as you can see, there are 3 key, crucial points. Increase efficiency. retain and reskill workforce, and increase visibility. What is efficiency increasing? Efficiency, I would like to stop here. So I would like to stop here for a moment. In the library, so in our library, in the university's library, you can access a book by John Dunning. So I'm going to repeat the name John Dunning. I'm also, hang on. I'm finding it so that you can see it. John Dunning, and he has a book, Multinational Enterprises and the Global Economy. Yeah, here it is. Okay, okay. I'm going to share the link with you, and then you are going to understand immediately. I'm going to share it now in the chat box. Okay, have you got it? Have you got it? Can you see? Okay, okay, very good. So actually, this is the last publication of John Dunning. Unfortunately, he has passed away in 2009. However, he used to be the most famous writer on multinational corporations, so global value chains. And actually, the last publication of his book was published with one of his disciples, Sariana Lundgren. However, the title of the book is Multinational Enterprises and the Global Economy. You can access this book in the library, so it can be found in our library. And according to John Dunning, transnational corporations have different motivations for going abroad. So transnational corporations have different motivations for going abroad. The most famous motivation, according to Dunning, is the so-called market seeking. So the so-called market seeking. It means that companies are going to a geographical region. So companies are going to a geographical region because they would like to reach the market of the given location. I will tell you a very easy example. If a Japanese or a Korean or a Chinese car maker comes to the eastern part of Europe, so for instance, Central and Eastern Europe, then this is typically a market-seeking enterprise. It means that all these companies coming from Asia, but also from North America or any parts of the world, realize that in Eastern Europe, the labor force is relatively cheap. However, these countries are members of the European Union, which means once they enter a country and once they abide by the rules of the local content requirements, the end products of the given company can be exported freely within the European Union, so within the regional integration, because once they have adopted the standards of the European Union, they are regarded as one company from within the Union. So that is the point. And actually, so with Eastern European labor, they can access the markets of the western part of Europe, the European Union, France, Germany, Italy, and so on and so forth. So actually, this is the policy of many investors. So for instance, Chinese companies set up an enterprise in Thailand and actually have an access to the ASEAN market, or any investor, any European investor sets up an enterprise in Mexico and reaches out to the NAFTA, or any investor sets up a plant in Argentina and has an access to the entire Mercosur, so the Mercado Común del Sur, the common market of the South in Latin America. So actually the point is that more than 50%, so more than 50% of the companies are so-called market seekers in the 21st century. That's the first main group, market seeking. The second main group, so the second main group is the so-called resource seeking. So resource seeking, and resource seeking can refer to different things. First and foremost, natural resources. So actually lots of the investments in Africa, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, are referring to the exploitation of natural resources, primarily obviously fuels, but also ores. So not only fuels, there can be also ores. Many Chinese, Indian investors or investors from the ASEAN countries are targeting Africa, North Africa, as well as the sub-Saharan Africa, because they are resource seeking, specifically natural resource seeking investors. But resource seeking can also mean human resources. So they can be also human resources as meant for qualified labor force. So it can be also qualified labor force, or financial resource seeking when a company sets up an office in Shanghai or sets up an office in New York or in London or in any financial center of the world where they can involve financial resources for the expansion of the company. So the first one is market seeking. The second one is resource seeking. The third one is the so-called strategic asset seeking. The third one is the so-called strategic asset seeking. Strategic asset seeking is highly, highly important throughout the crisis. You might remember, that last week when I told you that I am shocked by the 2020 World Investment Report, because normally throughout downturns, economic downturns, throughout crises, it is the greenfield investments that are falling back, that are diminishing, that are decreasing. And as a counteract, mergers and acquisitions are on the up and up. They are on the rise, because actually the philosophy is that the big fish eats the small fish. So actually companies are merging into each other with a stronger procuring the weaker one. And I told you last week that I am quite shocked because throughout this crisis, so I mean the pandemic, this health crisis, even the mergers and acquisitions are declining, both in terms of numbers and both in terms of values. So that's surprising. I'll tell you why. Because strategic asset seeking is nothing else but mergers and acquisitions provided by unusual economic circumstances, for instance, by crisis. So the situation is that a big company, the stronger company, the procurer procures, buys the smaller company, not because it necessarily needs the smaller company. However, it basically clears up the market. It is basically creating a stronger and wider portfolio for itself. So it is portfolio strengthening, it is eliminating of the competitors, and actually it is making generating advantages of the given crisis. This is strategic asset seeking. So it is a strategical decision for acquiring assets, not necessarily because of the needs for the certain assets. And now we are coming to the fourth point, and this is why I stopped. Because as you can see this chart, so I said there is market seekers, there is resource seekers, then there are strategic asset seekers. And now we can see the 2021 priorities of company leaders. And in this, I am at the Ernst & Young publication right now. And as you can see, in the first 3 places, you can see increase efficiency, retains and reskill workforce, and increase visibility. What is the first one? Efficiency seeking. I'm going to be very honest with you. When we are looking at Dunning's book, The Multinational Enterprises and the Global Economy, he has a 4th motivation for seeking. So apart from market seeking, strategic asset seeking, and resource seeking, there is a 4th kind of seeking, which is called efficiency seeking. So the 4th and last motivation for seeking by multinational enterprises is efficiency seeking. And I'm going to be very upfront with you, it is nothing else than cost cutting. So actually regrouping the production or the provision of services to places in the world that are the most cost effective. So once more, efficiency seeking is nothing else but cost cutting. So this is what companies are doing. They are regrouping, they are reorganizing company production to places where it can be carried out in a most cost-effective fashion. So actually, we need to face this one, that in the next year or in the next 1.5 years or in the next 2 years, companies are going to be efficiency seekers as opposed to market seekers, and they are going to look out to places where they can produce and provide services in a more cost-effective fashion. Actually, the cost that can be cut in a fastest place and in the most significant pace is obviously labor costs. So actually labor costs are going to count a lot in the next 1.5, 2 years. And actually it resonates with retraining and reskilling labor force, because in those industries where work could be carried out in an online fashion, workforce and employment was meant to be upheld. However, in those industries, and for instance, in the automotive industry, first and foremost in the automotive industry, where physical presence is needed for the production, many people were laid off and lost their jobs. So actually, companies are now rethinking who they can hire, who they can rehire, who they can retain, and who they can reskill, because there was a massive loss of employment throughout the crisis. And actually, it is not the same jobs, it is not the same vacancies that are going to be filled. It is the new vacancies that are created by transnational corporations that are going to be filled. And the third point is increasing visibility. And actually, that is the point. So actually, increasing visibility means that, for instance, in some of the cases, in some of the industries, and there examples are given, for instance, for vaccines that have to be stored in a very low temperature, or for instance, frozen foods, one needs to be able to monitor the shipment of the parts, the components, and the goods within the global value chain. So actually, visibility, and this is where it is not written in this article, but this is what they are referring to, that actually Bitcoin techniques, follow-up techniques, tracking down techniques are going to be very important, because it will be impossible to maintain a global value chain without ensuring the visibility of products and services traveling through the value chain. And actually, this is how value added. So TIVA, value added, this is the tracking down of value added within one country. value added connects to visibility, because if you can track down the value added within one country, then you can make it transparent how the given product or service travels around the country. And actually, there are going to be many other more motivations: increasing responsiveness, managing costs, which actually first and foremost refers back to efficiency, increasing sustainability, diversifying the suppliers, moving towards contract manufacturing. I'm going to touch upon that, and deploying digital twin and other simulation technologies. I would like to touch upon two things, because three actually. One is increasing sustainability and corporate social responsibility. Interestingly, we might think that the priorities of sustainable development and social responsibility are lost throughout the crisis. However, according to the research of the Ernst & Young researchers, the end result is that companies are basically using this crisis to basically implement sustainability measures into their policies and strategies. So actually, we might presume that sustainability and social responsibility is forgotten. However, the opposite, the reverse is true. Basically, sustainability concepts are implemented into company strategies and policies. The second topic I would like to touch upon is the diversification and segmentation of suppliers. Actually, this is a huge question. So actually, we don't know. I tell you why we don't know. Because for instance, the car industry was very, very severely hit throughout the crisis. You are going to be able to see it in the World Trade Organization documents. So actually, companies, for instance, automotive companies, need to rethink their global strategies and need to rethink how they diversify and segment their suppliers in order to be able to uphold constant production and constant operation within value chains. 70% of the automotive industry was very severely hit by the crisis and the disruption of value chains. So this is an area where we can expect huge changes. And I think digital twinning and ICT technologies are self-evident, so I don't want to lose more time on this one. But I would like to touch upon contract manufacturing. So contract manufacturing, and generally on the expression of contracting out. Contracting out is hugely important. It means I'm explaining. Contracting out, it is not only contract manufacturing, but also contract services. This is why I'm using the terminology contracting out, because it is not only referring to manufacturing, it refers also to services. This is why it is, I think, more fitting to use the terminology contracting out. Contracting out basically means that there are no foreign direct investments in these cases. So for instance, if there is a home country with a home company that wishes to establish an affiliate somewhere around the world, doesn't matter where, then normally the cash holdings of the home company would translate into investments somewhere else in the world. This doesn't happen. So actually, contract manufacturing means that it wouldn't happen. Contract manufacturing means that there is a home company, there is a home country, and there is a home company. And the home country or the home company finds a very well equipped, I mean, financially very well equipped investor in the host economy. For instance, a German company wishes to create, I'm going to be very simple, for instance, shoes in China, or a North American company, Nike, wishes to produce shoes in China. Earlier, the American company would set up the manufacturing plot, the manufacturing enterprise in China, and would employ Chinese employees, and that was it, and re-exported the product to the United States of America and all the other parts of the world. In the case of contract manufacturing, it doesn't happen. What happens is as follows. The investor company finds a financially well-equipped investor in the host economy. So, for instance, a Chinese investor. The Chinese investor builds up a company, any factory, for instance, in textiles, in shoes, in whatever, also in automobiles, whatever, any manufacturing industry. And actually, the owner of the logo, so the owner of the company, the owner of the copyrights, basically lends the logo of the company to the factual investor that is basically running under the brand of the given company. So in this case, equally, for instance, Nike shoes are produced in China, but the investor is Chinese, and only there is a subcontracting between the original North American, I wouldn't say investor because there is no investment, quote unquote investor, and the host country of the given capital. So this is the difference between foreign direct investments and contract manufacturing. Before I ask you if you understand me, I'm going to tell you one more very transparent example. For instance, in tourism, in the hotel industry, it is a very widespread exercise, so it happens day by day. For instance, you might have heard about the hotel chain that is called Sofitel. So for instance, Sofitel has many hotels around the world, but these are not the investments of the home country and the home company. However, you can subcontract the hotelier industry. So if you are well off enough to establish a kind of investment into the hotel industry, then they give you the parameters according to which a hotel must be built, and then you are lent the brand, and basically you are returning a given percentage of the profits to the original brander, or so the brander of the given company. It is also widespread among airlines, in hotels, and now in manufacturing as well. Do you get me? Do you get me? Do you understand me?
Yes.
Yes, this is why I was asking. Just let me go back to the end of this chart, and this is why I'm trying to open up the room for questions. So what I wanted to tell you that there are three priorities: efficiency increasing, which is cost cutting, retaining and retraining labor force, increasing visibility, which is tracking down the value added and the route. And actually there are three more important issues. One is inclusion of sustainability, the reorganization of the entire supply chain, which translates into the diversity and segmentation of suppliers. And what is hugely interesting is contract manufacturing, or contracting out in services. And actually ICT industries, so the rise of ICT industry is self-evident, and this is why I was not explaining any longer. Okay, and I'm now getting back to the questions, please. Thank you. Please go ahead. Yeah. Franchise is a form of contract manufacturing. Licensing, franchising, yes. Franchise is one form of contract manufacturing. Yes, it's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, it is a form, but there are millions of legal forms, but that's the point. Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. Okay. Have you got further questions, please? Okay, then I'm going to get back to this one. So if you scroll down, to the bottom of the page, this Ernst and Young page, then actually you will see that basically Ernst and Young research suggests that 60% of the executives say that the pandemic has increased their supply chain strategic importance. So actually, how the supply chain is organized, it is going to be hugely important for them. And actually, the first question, what we don't know now, and this is what I would like to underline, we don't know. So actually, they need to rapidly redefine the supply chain strategy and alter global trade flows, considering new trade agreements, country incentives, and omni-channel acceleration. So actually, global trade flows will basically decide how the global supply chains are going to organize. Because if trade basically disenables the activity of global supply chains, then global supply chains are disrupted. So this is where I would like to stop. So I told you that there is the capital market and the trade market, basically the commodity market. Capital markets and commodity markets are unifying through global supply chains. And the disruption of global supply chains, so the disruption in the unification of the capital markets happens because of the breakdown in trade flows. So basically, the disruption in commodity markets basically propels the disruption in capital markets, and we need to understand it that one derives from the other. So that's one point that we need to understand. And the second point that we need to understand is in the second bullet point, that basically companies are now deciding, so global value chains are deciding now what should be done locally, I mean, within a framework of one country, what should be produced and delivered regionally, so within the framework of one regional integration, and what can be safely outsourced globally. And for the latter, it includes also warehouses and manufacturing sites. So actually, last week, it was very difficult for me to understand how it is going to be reorganized, because even companies don't know. So this is going to happen in the next 1 or 1.5 years, that basically companies are reassessing the national, the regional, and the global scales, the global standards, the global manufacturing opportunities. And actually, the entire thing derives from the international trade disruption. Okay, I have already touched up on the transparency, so we can understand that. And actually, we can understand that obviously the motivation of the transnational corporations is profits and extracting cash, and creating a competitive advantage strategy with sustainability. I think that's okay. And we have also understood that obviously ICT is a means for carrying out the strategic aims of transnational corporations. If we have understood this one, then I'm going to close it down. As for the multinational enterprises and the global economy, so I am only asking you to kindly remember these 4 seekings. So efficiency seeking, resource seeking, strategic asset seeking, and market seeking. And for the exam, it is absolutely substantial. However, it is sufficient what I have said. But if you are interested in the book, entire book, you can check it down in the library. please go through this article, what we have covered right now. And now I would like you to open up the World Trade Organization's document, which is, it is a press release 862. Trade shows significant signs of rebound from COVID-19 recovery, still uncertain. So once more, it is a press release 862 by the World Trade Organization, and the title is Trade Shows Signs of Rebound from COVID-19 Recovery, Still Uncertain. Have you got it? Have you got it?
Yes.
Has everyone opened it, please? Because it is very important. Have you got it all open?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So actually, first and foremost, I would like you to look at the top right corner, please. So I would like you to look at the top right corner, please. And the reason is as follows. Because actually, this document was published on the 6th of October 2020. And actually, we are facing the same situation as we are facing with the World Investment Report. Our next document that we are going to go through is the World Trade Statistical Review 2020. However, we do not have much for the year 2020 in the World Trade Statistical Review, because just like the World Investment Report, it refers to the previous year, which is quite insufficient for us. So we need to understand trends after the crisis and throughout the crisis. So actually, sorry, I'm switching off my phone. So we need figures for the crisis and for 2021. So this is why I am opening up this press release, because this was published at the end of last year, and this is all we know about international trade as a consequence of the crisis. So first and foremost, I would like you to go down to chart one, and you can see the world merchandise trade volume from 2000 to 2021. And we will realize that actually the figures are not exact yet. So these are not precise calculations. However, to current estimations, and I would like to underline that these are current estimations. Last year, so in 2020, the world merchandise trade dropped by 9.2%. I'm going to be very honest with you. We don't know if it is the final end result. So actually, it was anticipated throughout 2020. It was anticipated that world merchandise trade would drop by 12.9%, so almost 13%. And if and when the calculations are okay, so if and when the calculations are okay, then the drops for last year were less. And instead of 13%, the drop was just over 9%, 9.2. However, there is a negative. Obviously, the entire thing is negative. So the whole pandemic is negative. There is nothing positive in a global pandemic. I'm just referring to trade figures. However, the next negative point, or the next detriment, I would say, that we are facing is that for this year, I'm saying 2021, the experts of the World Trade Organization have anticipated a growth in merchandise trade of 21.3%. So actually, there was a growth anticipated for this year that would be over 20%, so 21.3. However, realistically, when experts are recalculating or on the basis of current trends, then it seems to be that this year's growth is not going to be more than 7.2%. So, which means last year's reduction, last year's loss was less than it was anticipated. However, this year's growth is going to be substantially less than it was anticipated. And now I would like you, to look at this chart, the world merchandise trade volume. And as you can see, it starts with 2000 and finishes with the anticipations of this year, so 2021. And as you can see, after the 2008 global economic downturn and crisis, we have already deviated from the growth pattern that was set around the millennium. So there was a huge drop compared to the growth pattern indicated in 2000. However, the world merchandise trade would recap after 2011, and there was a steady growth. And as you can see, this steady growth that was recaptured in 2011 was again broken. And the only thing that we don't know right now is how much it is broken. What I would like to tell you, and it is a very important piece of information, that global GDP, it is not exact. So again, these are not exact numbers, but it was calculated to have fallen by 4.9% last year. So globally, I'm going to go down to the charts. Global GDP was to be calculated to be fallen by 4.8%. And this year, it is again anticipated to be rising by 4.9% from the basis of last year. So actually the loss of last year is predicted, is anticipated to be growing with the same amount this year. I would like you to go down. So I would like you to go down to table one, please. Okay. It is merchandise trade volume and real GDP between 2015 and 2021. So actually in the top two rows, we can see merchandise trade broken down to exports and imports. And in the third row, so in the very bottom, broken down into geographical areas, we can see the real GDP at market exchange rates, so GDP change. Let's go up to world trade, okay, exports and imports. What I would like to tell you that actually even in the year of 2019, so even in the year of 2019, the volume of world merchandise trade was declining. It was minus 0.1%. And as you can see in geographical regions, it was varying massively because there were some positive regions like North America or Europe or Asia, but actually growth was 1% or even less than 1%, which was basically or could be statistical error. And the same refers to imports. So I'm still speaking of the year 2019, where basically Europe and other regions of the world experienced a rise in imports. each and every other region experienced a loss. However, these changes were around 1 or 2%, which is again can be translated as a statistical error. So from this basis, and I'm still only speaking about exports and imports, so international trade, you can see the end results in the year 2020, where we have experienced, as I said, a 9%, 9.2% loss in international trade, which was less than anticipated throughout the crisis. Let's go down to the geographical regions because it is hugely important. The massive losers were, so the most important, the most outstanding losers of international exports were the North American continent, so North America and Europe. On the third place, other regions of the world comprising Africa, the Middle East, the Commonwealth of Independent States, obviously the former countries of the Soviet Union, and on the third place, South and Central America, and last but not least, Asia. So if we go through the continents, the geographical regions of the world, then in terms of exports, the greatest sufferers were the United States of America, and then Europe, and the safest player was obviously Asia, and especially developing Asia. As for the imports, it is highly notable that it was South and Central America that was suffering the import losses, and I would like to underline equally other regions of the world and Europe, and I would like to underline that this is really a tragedy, because you might think that a loss in imports is not that relevant, because a trade balance much more focuses on exports than imports. So if exports grow and if imports are diminishing, then you can even create a more positive trade balance. However, we need to understand that this is a total misconception. So this is a total misconception. Why? Because as we said previously, 70% of the international trade happens within global value chains, which means each and every country exports the same product that it is importing. So what happens within a global value chain is that an import happens, then the given country is adding value, and with the value added content, the country is exporting the same product. So actually, if imports are falling, it means that the global value chains are disrupted and there is nothing to add value to, and then there is nothing to export. So actually, the loss of imports is an equal tragedy to a loss of exports. And in that terms, the South American and Central American continent was most massively hit. What I would like to show you that actually this year the recap is anticipated. However, the global recap in terms of international trade is anticipated to be around 7%, which is much less than the 20% that was anticipated in the middle of the last year. So in the middle of the last year, WTO experts thought that we would be on the rise by 20%, far from it, so really far from it. And the greatest risers or the greatest increasers are North America on the export side, Europe, obviously, and other regions of the world, whereas South and Central America and Asia are also on the rise by approximately 5%. And actually, as for imports, the field is quite leveled. So there is a level playing field around the continents between 5 and 8, 5 and maximum 9% respectively. What I would like you to do now is to have a look at the GDP growth, theoretically and practically as well. As you can see in 2019, but even throughout the preceding years to 2018, 2017, the real GDP growth of the world was basically constant. So there was only one region of the world that demonstrated reasonable GDP growth before 2019 or before 2020. And unsurprisingly, this continent was Asia. So if you go through, if you look at the real GDP figures, then you can see that it was only Asia that experienced real growth of 4.2, 4.8, 4.1, 3.9 throughout 2016 and 19. And again, all other parts of the world were around 1 to 3%, some in minus, some in surplus, so some in positive, but nothing demonstrative, nothing impressive happened. However, last year, the crisis created massive losses in the global GDP. The most ostensive losses happened in South and Central America, as well as in Europe. So the big losers of this crisis were the South and Central American continent and Europe. And this year, on the basis of the previous year, so the basis is always the previous year, on the basis of the previous year, we are anticipating huge rises in GDP rates. What I would like to underline theoretically, so what I would like to underline theoretically is the fact that world trade, so world merchandise trade, but also services, generate the GDP. So as we know, obviously, the output, the income depends on government expenditures, investments, consumption, and obviously the trade balance. So obviously we all know that the GDP is generated by international trade. However, there is a healthy ratio. So I would like to attract your kind attention to the fact that there is a healthy ratio between the GDP growth and the exports growth, so the trade growth, I would say, and it is a ratio of 1 to 2. So it is a ratio of 1 to 2. So for instance, if international trade is expected to increase by 10%, then it is quite normal that the real GDP growth is expected to be around 5%. So this is what I'm saying, that there is a healthy ratio between GDP growth and trade growth, with the latter having an effect on the former, obviously. And if it is 10% for the exports, then it is quite normal, then it is 5% for the GDPs, because you are going to see it in the World State statistical report that this ratio has been an ongoing fact, calculated back for many years. Okay, what you can see, I would like you to have a look at chart 2. So I would like you to have a look at chart 2. And the only thing I would like you to know, that this refers to the merchandise trade volume, and it describes optimistic and pessimistic scenarios. So actually, there are always 3 kinds of calculations, and this is why I was looking at a fresh document that I can present you in the class, because actually currently there are 3 scenarios. There is a baseline, there is a pessimistic, and there is an optimistic one. And actually, it is calculated on the basis of the year of the first quarter of 2021. However, we don't know which scenario is going to come into fruition, which one is going to come into existence. So actually, the only thing I can tell you that we don't know. These are the 3 expectations, these are the 3 projections, but unfortunately, I think we are only going to be able to tell it by the first 3 months, so January to March, but on a safe place, April 2022. So actually, to have realistic facts, we need to wait 1 more year, so around April 2022. And then we are going to see how much impact the crisis would have on international trade and the unification, the integration of international commodity markets. What I would like to add here is a breaking up to regions in chart 3, so North America, Europe, and Asia. Actually, we have already covered the fact that the developed parts of the world, primarily Europe and North America, are very severely affected. And as I said, I still do believe that notwithstanding the crisis, Asia is going to be the continent of the 21st century. So I still do think that Asia is going to fare at a quite safe place after the crisis. So Asia is going to be basically a winner of the crisis. What I would like to show you, which is hugely, hugely important, is chart point 4. So world services, trade activity, and actually it is a timeline between 2007 and 2020, exactly the first 2 quarters of 2020. And why do I think it is very important? Because actually, normally when a crisis happens, as you can see throughout the 2008 crisis, there was a backlash for international services, so for the trade in international services. However, it wasn't as massive as the loss for international manufacturing trade loss. However, if you look at this one, so if you look at this crisis, I mean the current one, the pandemic, then you can immediately see that the decline is huge compared to the decline that was experienced in 2008 and 2009. And actually the reason is obvious. We were closing down borders, there were curfews, there was no international travel, there were lockdowns, and actually basically the entire hotel industry, the entire international tourism, the entire international one-on-one services, so services provided on a one-on-one basis, have suffered a massive loss. And actually, again, I am still unsure when we are going to have a final result on this one. Okay. Obviously, there is a huge difference if we are returning back. I'm coming. So this is for services. What I wanted to say that this kind of loss in the trade in international services is unprecedented. So each and every economist, each and every forecast provider anticipates or hopes, though hope is not a strategy, as we all know. So hope is not a strategy, but everyone hopes that this is one in a century crisis, because actually no one knows how to respond, because we haven't seen anything like that. So the only thing that I wanted to tell you in connection of the services loss, that actually this is absolutely unprecedented. So we haven't seen anything like that. And actually, if we come down, I would like you to scroll down to chart 5, please. So this is a year-on-year growth in world merchandise trades between 2019 and 2020, and obviously it touches up on the quarters of the year, so the 4 quarters of the year. Actually, as you can see, the total merchandise trade has lost by the second quarter of 2020 of more than 20%, so 21%. But if you look at agriculture, manufacturers, fuels and mining products, then you will see that this is the fuels and the mining products that have suffered the most, then manufacturing. and agricultural products were affected by the crisis at least. This is what I have told previously. So for instance, canned food and other agricultural products were on the rise. So some parts of the agricultural production were on the rise as opposed to the loss of other parts of manufacturing, for instance, manufacturers and fuels and mining products. And what I would like to show you, and I would like you to remember, it is chart 6. So I would like you to kindly remember chart 6, because the Ernst & Young publication covered the same groupings, and this is what I would like you to know. So actually, textiles, computers, the ICT, integrated circuits, pharmaceuticals were on the rise. And if you look at the other end of the scale, the greatest losers were the automotive producers. So the automotive industry, they would absolute 70% loss. This is why I'm telling that actually the automotive industry, I'm pretty sure will be reorganized within the next 1.5 years, because with a loss of 70%, it is impossible to uphold the global value chains organized in today's fashion. The second big losers were the travel goods, handbags providers, so everything related to international travel. The third one was footwear and clothing. So actually the entire fashion industry is going to be reorganized, because if you're not going anywhere, you are not needing clothes, obviously. And then it was iron and steel and international machinery. And then all the other industries have lost, but only parts of the producers, parts of the providers. So we can define the absolute winners and we can define the absolute losers. And then there are some sectors in between. Yes, actually, chart 7 and chart 8 are not that important, and I'm going to be very honest. So from chart 7 to chart 10, I am not going to ask anything, because they are only supplementary indicators. So I don't think you need to know these indicators in the exam. But I would like you to cover this document as I have spoken about, and I would like you to read the documentation from chart 1 to chart 6, please. And actually, I wanted to cover more, to be very honest. I wanted to cover more because though the World Trade and Statistical Report is not really up to date, but there is a theoretical background I would like to cover for international trade that affects more theory than the given economic year. But we only got 4 more minutes, so I'm going to skip it for the next class. We are still fine with the timing, I mean, as for the semester. So I am opening the room for questions, please, okay? Have you got any questions? I'm more than pleased to answer all your questions. Actually, I forgot to add that obviously the recap of value chains are also depending on the rolling out of vaccination. So obviously, if a larger portion of the population is vaccinated, then obviously trust is being rebuilt. So vaccination obviously results into building up value chains and hosting transnational corporations and international trade. Have you got any questions, please? Comments? Was it clear? Everyone is really silent. Clear? Was it clear? Okay, actually, it was a really good one at that. Contract manufacturing. I'm going to be very honest, I cannot remember really, because I do read the World Investment Report each and every year. So I'm very honest. I don't remember in which year it was included into the World Investment Report, but as far as I remember, it was sometime after the crisis. I mean, the 2008 crisis. I think it was in 2012 or 2013. So this contract manufacturing was already covered in the first chapter of the World Investment Report just after the crisis, 2012 or 2013. So this is why I told you that it is very essential to go through the World Investment Reports, because sometimes they entail valuable theory. And this contract manufacturing has been already covered, but honestly, I cannot remember which issue. But it is written in a very high detail, and it is also explained how much, for instance, franchising or licensing is a sub part of subcontracting, contracting out, contract manufacturing, contract services. Have you got any more questions, please? Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah, quality control. Yeah. Mhm. Actually, this is contract manufacturing. This is contract manufacturing. This is a very good example of contract manufacturing, that, for instance, the same product is sold with logo or without logo, and with logo, it is contract manufacturing. Without, it is just a cheap end product. Yeah. Actually, this is the point. This is what the point. This is what I am saying, that actually this is a quote unquote investment. But this is why it is. Thank you for the questions and thank you for the clarification, because this is the point. Investment doesn't happen. This is why it is called contracting out, because actually the producer already exists. So this is what I said. There is a rich Chinese enterprise, so the investment already exists. Contracting out means contracting out the logo, contracting out the brand, contracting out intellectual property, anything. So actually know-how or anything. So this is why it is called contracting out, as opposed to foreign direct investments, because that's the point. Investment doesn't happen. Thanks for the clarification, because that's the very point. Yeah, that's the gist of the sentence. Everywhere, everywhere. Manufacture. Exactly. Actually, this is why I'm saying quote unquote investment, because that's the point. Investment wouldn't happen, and that's the tragedy, because because investment in a given year is a flow of FDI. On the long run, it is a stock, but it doesn't happen. So actually, and this is why it is a reverse mechanism basically in the global economy. So we are not celebrating contracting out because it is just a substitute for real investments. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Very good. Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, then thank you very much and see you next week. And please take care of yourselves and please vaccinate yourselves. So please register for vaccination. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye. Goodbye.